Blessings. Welcome to today's Law Enforcement Daily Devotional. We're in Deuteronomy chapters 14 through 17, and there is a lot of great information that came from this. It was a fun read. And right off the bat, in 15 verse 6, God tells Israel, "You will lend to many nations, but you will borrow from none." In other words, don't tie yourself to another nation. Don't be dependent upon them. Um, and it's a really good lesson. And one of the people that obviously read the Bible and took this lesson to heart was George Washington. In George Washington's farewell address to America, he urged, now this is his farewell address. He had served a couple of terms and he was not going to serve again because he didn't want the United States to fall into this dictatorship or this royal, line of kings like I started to say Israel, like England had done. He didn't want us to be like England. So in his farewell address, he is telling future Americans this. He says future leaders of the country to avoid unnecessary borrowing and paying off any national debt accumulated in times of war as quickly as possible. He knew the importance that God played in America and the success of America. And I just want to read you real quick a quote from that farewell address. It says, "Of all the dispensations and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man claim the tribute of patriotism who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens. The mere politician, equal with the pious man, ought to respect and cherish them. A volume could not trace all their connections with private and public felicity. Let it simply be asked, where is the security for property or reputation for life? In the sense of religious obligation, desert the oaths which are in the interest of investigation in courts of justice, and let us with caution indulge the supposition that morality can be maintained without religion. Whatever may be conceded in the influence of refined education on minds of particular structure, reason and experience both forbid us to expect that national morality can prevail in exclusion of religious principle." George Washington left us this warning, this advice. Do not let your government run on anything other than religious moral principles. Our country got a long way away from that, and we seem to be getting even further away from that. But George Washington knew the importance of it way back when. He knew America would not be successful, even in our justice system, without the reliance and dependence upon God. In 15:9, God is the great mediator of Israel and their system of justice. And I think that's where George Washington learned this, because he was an educated religious man. In chapter 16, verses 19 and 20, there's a cool law enforcement takeaway. It says, "You shall not distort justice. You shall not be partial. And you shall not take a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of the wise and perverts the words of the righteous. Justice and only justice you shall pursue, that you may live and possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you." Pursue justice. I love that takeaway. 17 verse 9 says, "So you shall come to the Levitical priest, or the judge who is in office in those days." What he's telling these guys is the Levitical priest hold a position of being judge, and more like a mobile judge. Oh, that would be like a police officer. I love the parallels between the Levites and law enforcement today. And that's a theme throughout the Bible. I want you to pay particular attention to that and be aware of them as they come up. The united country of Israel only had 3 kings, because after Solomon they split, and you had the nation of Israel and then the nation of Judah. And the line of David went through Judah. The kings of David were in Judah. But I thought it was so cool in Deuteronomy chapter 17, 14, it's talking about the unified country. In chapter 14, read it and see if you can see where it describes King Saul, Israel's first king. Verse 15, the next verse, see if it describes David, Israel's second king. And then verses 16 to 17, see if you can see where it describes King Solomon, Israel's third king. The cool thing about this is none of these kings had even been born yet. So it's kind of a prophetic look at this. Really cool. Anyway, just a really neat takeaway from today. Tomorrow we're going to be in Deuteronomy chapters 18 through 21. Read ahead, come back here, and let's look for a law enforcement takeaway. Until then, be safe.